Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are going to be tackling something that I know a lot of you have been asking about. We're going to be diving deep into mortgages, but not just any mortgages. Today's episode is all about Kenyan mortgages. So if you've ever thought about maybe owning property in Kenya, well, stick around because this is going to be your ultimate guide. We'll be walking you through the entire process, step by step. And to help us break it all down, I've got an expert here with me. Now, before we jump in, let me just clarify that we're basing this deep dive on a really comprehensive guide we found.
Oh, yeah, this guide is great. It's from a super reliable Kenyan real estate resource. So, we're working with solid info here.
Okay, so let's get started. First things first, what exactly are we talking about when we say mortgage?
Well, at its core, a mortgage is basically a loan you get to buy a property. But here's the catch. The property itself becomes like collateral for the loan.
Okay, so the property is kind of like a guarantee for the lender, right?
Exactly.
So it's not just about finding a house you like, it's also about making sure you can handle that loan.
Right, and that's where things can get a little tricky, especially in Kenya, because there are so many different lenders to choose from. You've got banks, SASOs, MFIs. It's like a whole buffet of options.
So how do you even begin to choose? Do you just pick the one with the lowest interest rate?
Well, it's not quite that simple. The interest rate is important, of course, but you also need to consider things like the loan terms, the fees, and even the lender's reputation.
Okay, so it's more about finding the right fit for your specific needs and your financial situation.
Exactly. It's like shopping for shoes. You wouldn't just grab the first pair you see, right? You want to try them on, make sure they're comfortable, and that they suit your style.
I like that analogy. So it sounds like research is key here.
Absolutely. And luckily, this guide we're looking at actually has a whole section on comparing different lenders. It even links to a really helpful video that walks you through the whole process.
Oh, that's awesome. I always appreciate when a guide goes the extra mile like that. We'll definitely have to check that out.
Mhm.
So let's say we've done our research, we've narrowed down our list of potential lenders. What's the next step? Do we just walk into a bank and say, hey, I want a mortgage?
Well, you could, but it's actually much smarter to start with something called prequalification.
Pre-qualification, what's that?
Basically, it's like getting a sneak peek at what you can actually afford to borrow.
How does that work?
You provide the lender with some basic financial information like your income, your debts, and your credit history, and they give you an estimate of your borrowing power.
Oh, so it's like a financial checkup before you commit to anything serious.
Precisely. It helps you set realistic expectations and avoid falling in love with a house that's way out of your price range.
Makes sense.
Mm.
So pre-qualification is all about knowing your limits before you start house hunting.
Yep. And it can actually make the whole process a lot smoother because sellers are more likely to take you seriously if you've already been pre-qualified.
Okay, so we've done our research, we've gotten pre-qualified, and now we're ready to start looking at properties. What's next?
Now comes the fun part, choosing your mortgage type.
Wait, there are different types of mortgages. I thought a mortgage was just a mortgage.
Well, in Kenya, you've actually got quite a few options to choose from. You've got your fixed rate mortgages, where the interest rate stays the same throughout the entire loan term.
Ah, that sounds pretty straightforward. Is that the most common type?
It is, yeah. People like the predictability of knowing exactly what their payments will be each month.
Yeah, I can see why that would be appealing, especially if you're on a tight budget. But what are the other options?
Well, you also have adjustable rate mortgages where the interest rate can fluctuate over time. This can be a bit riskier because your payments could go up, but it can also be a good option if you're expecting your income to increase in the future.
Interesting. So it's all about weighing the pros and cons and figuring out what fits your risk tolerance.
Exactly. And there are even more specialized options like Sharia compliant mortgages for those who follow Islamic finance principles.
Wow, I had no idea there were so many choices. It's great that the Kenyan mortgage system offers such variety.
It is. And we haven't even talked about construction loans, the Access Mortgage Facility, or diaspora mortgages.
Okay, so there's clearly a lot to consider when it comes to choosing the right mortgage.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to do your research and understand all the options before you commit to anything.
So let's say we found a property we love, we've chosen our lender, and we've even decided on the perfect type of mortgage. What happens next?
Well, now it's time to gather all those essential documents.
Oh, the dreaded paperwork. I knew this was coming.
I know, it can seem a bit daunting, but it's actually not as bad as it sounds if you stay organized.
Okay, so what kind of documents are we talking about here?
Well, you'll need things like your ID, your KRA PIN, proof of income, bank statements, a credit report.
Wow, that's quite a list. Is there a way to make sure we don't miss anything?
The guide we're using actually provides a really handy checklist. It breaks down all the documents you'll need into different categories so you can stay on top of things.
That's super helpful. I'm all about checklists. They make life so much easier.
They really do. And it's important to remember that each lender might have their own specific requirements, so it's always best to double check with them directly.
Okay, so let's say we've gathered all our documents, we've triple-checked everything, we're feeling good. What's the next step?
Now it's time to submit your application.
This is it, huh? The moment of truth.
It is. But don't worry, if you've done your homework and you've got all your ducks in a row, the application process should be pretty straightforward.
So we fill out the forms, we attach all our documents, and then we just cross our fingers and hope for the best.
Pretty much. But remember, accuracy is key. Make sure all the information on your application is correct and that you've included certified copies of all your documents.
Okay, so attention to detail is crucial here. No room for sloppiness.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions if anything is unclear. It's better to be safe than sorry.
So, application submitted. What happens now? Do we just wait for a response?
You do, yep. The lender will review your application and all your documents, and they'll get back to you with a decision.
And how long does that usually take?
Well, it depends on the lender and how complex your application is, but it could be anywhere from a few days to a few weeks.
So it's the waiting game now. The suspense is killing me.
I know, it can be nerve-wracking. But try to relax and focus on the positive. You're one step closer to owning your dream property in Kenya.
You're right, it's all part of the process. And speaking of process, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. But we still got a lot more to explore, so when we come back, we'll be diving into what happens after you get that all-important approval. Stay tuned.
This is getting good.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. So before the break, we talked about submitting the application, all those documents. Now what? What happens next?
Well, the lender's going to review everything, take a good look, and then they'll get back to you with their decision.
And if it's a yes, what happens then?
Then the fun really begins. You'll get what's called an offer letter.
An offer letter. So is that like a contract?
Sort of. It basically outlines all the terms of the mortgage, like the interest rate, the loan term, the monthly payments.
Oh, okay. So it's super important to read that offer letter carefully, right?
Absolutely. You want to make sure you understand every single detail before you sign anything.
Yeah, no surprises.
Exactly.
So let's say we're happy with the offer. We sign on the dotted line. What's the next step?
Well, then we move on to the legal stuff, the official transfer of the property.
Ah, the legal stuff. Always my favorite part.
I know, right? But it's actually really important. This is where things get official.
So what does this legal process actually involve?
Well, there are a few key steps. The first one is drafting the sale agreement.
Sale agreement. Okay,
Yep.
what is that exactly?
It's basically a contract between you, the buyer, and the seller. It outlines all the terms of the sale, like the purchase price, the closing date, any contingencies.
So it's like the rule book for the whole transaction.
Exactly. It protects both you and the seller and makes sure everyone's on the same page.
Okay, that makes sense. So what happens after the sale agreement is sorted out?
Then comes the title search.
Title search, what's that?
It's basically a background check on the property. A lawyer will go through all the records to make sure the seller actually has the right to sell the property and to check if there are any outstanding claims or debts attached to it.
So it's like making sure the property has a clean slate.
Exactly. You don't want any nasty surprises popping up later on.
Makes sense. Okay, so sale agreement, title search, what's the final step?
The final step is the transfer of title.
So this is where I actually become the owner, right?
You got it. The property is officially registered in your name, but here's the catch. The lender will also have a charge on the title.
A charge? What does that mean?
It basically means that the lender still have a legal claim on the property until you've paid off the entire mortgage. It's their way of protecting their investment.
Yeah, I see. So I'm the owner, but the lender still has some strings attached.
Exactly. But hey, at least you're on your way to owning your dream home in Kenya.
True. Okay, so we've covered the application process, the offer letter, the legal stuff. What's next?
Well, now comes the part that everyone loves talking about. The repayments.
The moment of truth. Time to start paying those EMIs.
It can seem a bit daunting, I know. But with a little planning and budgeting, it's totally manageable.
So any tips for making those repayments as painless as possible?
Well, the first thing is to make sure you understand all the terms of your mortgage, like the interest rate, the repayment period, any fees or penalties.
Yeah, knowledge is power.
Exactly. And once you have a clear understanding of everything, you can start creating a budget.
Budgets are crucial. They keep me sane.
Me too. And when it comes to mortgage repayments, it's all about prioritizing. Treat those payments like any other essential expense, like your rent or your groceries.
Right, so no more impulse buys until the mortgage is paid off.
Or maybe just a few.
Fair enough. So budgets, prioritizing, any other tips for managing those repayments?
One thing that can be super helpful is setting up automatic payments.
Oh yeah, I love automation. It takes the stress out of remembering due dates.
Me too. And it also helps you avoid late fees, which can really add up.
Great point. So budgeting, automation, anything else we should keep in mind?
Well, it's always a good idea to have an emergency fund.
Oh yeah, emergencies happen.
They do. And having that financial cushion can really help you stay on track with your mortgage repayments, even if something unexpected comes up.
That's solid advice. So we've covered a lot of ground in this episode, from pre-qualification to repayments, but I feel like there's still so much more to discuss.
There is. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
So what are we diving into next time?
Well, next time we're going to get into some of the challenges that people often face when trying to get a mortgage in Kenya. And we'll share some tips on how to overcome those obstacles.
Sounds juicy. I can't wait. All right, everyone, thanks for tuning in to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time for more on Kenyan mortgages. All right, welcome back to The Deep Dive. We are on the final stretch of our deep dive into the world of Kenyan mortgages. Now, we've covered, so much ground in the past two parts.
Yeah, we've gone through, everything from pre-qualification to finding a property, picking the right mortgage type, and even all that legal stuff.
Oh, yeah, all the fun paperwork. But before we wrap up this whole mortgage adventure, I think there's one more important thing we need to touch on, and that's the kind of the emotional side of this whole journey. Because buying a home, it's not just a financial decision, right? It's a huge life event.
Totally. I mean, think about it. You're talking about maybe potentially the biggest purchase most people will ever make in their lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it can bring up so many emotions: excitement, stress, maybe even a little bit of fear.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling when you finally find the perfect property,
Oh, yeah.
but then the stress of getting the mortgage approved and, all the paperwork.
The waiting.
Exactly. It can be a real roller coaster ride.
So how do you manage all of those emotions? Any tips for staying, sane throughout this whole process?
Well, I think the first thing is to just acknowledge those feelings. Don't try to bottle them up.
Yeah, just let it all out.
Exactly. Talk to your friends, your family, vent a little.
Get it off your chest.
Right. And remember, it's okay to feel overwhelmed sometimes. This is a big deal.
Yeah, no shame in admitting that.
And if you're feeling really stressed, don't be afraid to seek professional help. Talk to a financial advisor or even a therapist.
Yeah, sometimes you just need that extra support.
Exactly. And remember, you're not alone in these things. Tons of people go through this same process every day.
It's a shared experience.
Exactly.
Well, I have to say, I've learned so much from this deep dive into Kenyan mortgages.
Me too. It's amazing how much there is to know.
Yeah, it's definitely not as simple as just picking out a house and signing on the dotted line.
Nope. It's a whole journey, but it's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this episode, any final words of wisdom for our listeners who are maybe thinking about starting their own Kenyan mortgage adventure?
I would say, first and foremost, do your research. We talked about this a lot, but it's so important to understand the process, know your options, and choose the right lender for you.
Research is key.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. Lenders, real estate agents, financial advisors, they're all there to help you.
Yeah, use those resources.
And lastly, remember that this is an exciting time. You're on your way to owning a piece of Kenya, so try to enjoy the process as much as you can.
I love that. It's a celebration. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of Kenyan mortgages. A huge thank you to our expert for sharing your insights and guiding us through this journey. And to all of you listening out there, best of luck on your own Kenyan mortgage adventures. Thanks for tuning in to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into who knows what.